السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، من يهده فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ونشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. All praises be to Allah, Lord of the heavens and the world. In His name I begin. Recently, I've been seeing a trend on the news. A certain trend that has been very saddening, making me feel down, and it's sad that it's not getting enough coverage. I'm sure some of you may have heard of it, but I wouldn't be surprised if many of you did. Recently, and in the past month, in fact, so between the end of June to the end of July, there were 8 cases of murders that involved a specific demographic. So the victims were all a specific demographic, and the murderers were also the same demographic. The victims were all Muslim women, and all the murderers were Muslim men. These women were college students, aspiring artists, mothers, daughters, human beings who had friends, families, lives that were ripped away from them. And as sad as it is to say, we must face the truth. These murders all had one thing in common. This has been an ongoing trend, and it hasn't been getting enough coverage, and which is why for this khutbah I wanted to talk about the violence that Muslim women are facing, specifically from us. I wanted to talk about the gravity of the situation, I wanted to talk about the cause of the situation, and I want to talk about why we should care and what we should do about it. So first off, I want to start off with the gravity of the situation. Why am I making this khutbah? Why is this so important? It was truly sickening reading some of these stories. Now, many of you may have known of one of these stories because it circulated all across social media. You may have seen it on Instagram, Facebook, wherever. And it was of a woman named Sania Khan, who was an aspiring photographer that was killed by her enraged, abusive ex-husband after she divorced him, well within her Islamic rights. Reading her story was pretty sad, seeing all of the pain that she went through, all the things that she went through, but it was overall very just heart like a gut among the community. However, at times it just seemed like a headline and just went away. However, like I mentioned, this was just one of 8 in the past month alone. I want to go over some of the other stories that I have known of, that was known to me at least, that I have seen that were not getting enough coverage. 2 of them involved university students in the Middle East, so one from Jordan and one from Egypt, both of whom were killed for doing something well within their rights as Muslim women, which was rejecting a marriage proposal. One of them was a young girl in Iran, only 15 years old, killed by her father in an honor killing. 2 women were killed by their husbands. One of them was found mutilated, in fact, all for a simple argument or just discussions of divorce. And one of the most shocking ones to me, however, was a very recent one that happened just 2 weeks ago in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, of a Somali sister named Alwiya Muhammad. This was a woman who had a 1-year-old child and was murdered by her husband in a murder-suicide. So similar to the famous Sania Khan story that we heard about, this was in the same ballpark. However, what really stuck out to me was that this woman who was murdered was only 20 years old. I am 20 years old. This woman was the same age as me, and that just hit me. That a woman my age has lost her life, all while having a son who is now an orphan. It's really, really sad to see this stuff. This just sounds like regular news headlines. Someone died, someone passed away. It's just another Tuesday. However, when we notice that these murders all have a common trend, and that number reached 8 in just 1 month alone, we have to accept the fact that this is a problem. We can't just sit on the sidelines and say, oh, just regular news. This is a problem. However, almost nothing is being done about it. I want to bring up one story from the Sirah that reminded me a lot about, that I was reminded of a lot when I was hearing story after story after story. And that was the story of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, who was slapping Aisha radiallahu anha. Now Aisha, we all know, is the wife of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one time, they had an altercation, they had an argument, and they settled it. They decided to settle it with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And in the midst of the argument, whether the Prophet ﷺ said something or did something, I'm not sure, but the point was that Aisha, Muhammad ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, fear Allah. And Abu Bakr was just enraged. How could you say that to the Prophet? How can one say that? If we hear any person just walking down the street say something disrespectful about our Prophet, that's like fighting words for us. But this was his own daughter who said something to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, so he slapped her. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ denounced that action, saying that's not right. That was not something that was supposed to do. That was not something that Abu Bakr should have done. A man slapped his daughter because she disrespected the Prophet, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that is not the way how you treat women. And here we are, seeing that these women are being murdered over small altercations, over rejecting marriage proposals, things that are well within their rights as Muslim women. This is a serious problem. It was already sad that women have constantly spoken of feeling unsafe in public spaces, Muslim women. But now, hearing these stories, it's much more saddening. Can they feel safe for doing things such as rejecting marriage proposals, disagreeing with their husbands, without being killed? Can they trust their own husbands, their own peers, their own fathers even? It's really sad to see. So I want to talk about the cause. I want to brush over it real quick. There's many takeaways from these stories, such as the negative cultural stigma around divorce, the over-control and policing of certain people, but there's a clear common factor in each of these stories. And I know it's a tough one to hear, but it is the truth in these 8, and that is male rage. It's hard to sometimes accept the fact that someone of our demographic, someone that is like us, is at fault, and therefore we are all at fault. However, we can't just sit on the sidelines. We have to accept the truth and the fact that this is the situation. And we can't just sit down and say, oh, it wasn't me, so I don't accept responsibility. I want to talk about something that I saw a while back on my feed. And it really stuck out to me because it did correlate a lot with these murders. And that was a certain phrase that many of you may have heard of. If you haven't heard of, I'm glad to teach you about it now. And that is toxic masculinity. Not to be confused with regular masculinity. But what is it? Toxic masculinity is a set of attitudes imposed on society on both men and women. It upholds wrong stigmas that harm women. I saw a post, going back to this post I saw a while back, it detailed how toxic masculinity is very prevalent in the Desi community, but reading it, I noticed this is prevalent in many Muslim communities, not just Desis. You see, what it does is that it normalizes misogynistic mindsets which take away the rights of Muslim sisters and the equality that they have with us. It teaches us that bad behavior from men is acceptable, more acceptable than bad behavior from women, as we saw in some of the stories from beforehand. But more importantly, it teaches us that men and all of their emotions are invalid with the exception of anger. So I want to talk about this for a second. It was really sad seeing that when this post came out, many of the responses from men were not in support, or were not even just neutral to the statement. However, they were all in opposition. Many men try to deflect, deny, blame women even for these cases, and it's something that happens often to interesting for me to read is that in some of these murders that I read, a lot of men were blaming the victims of the murders for what happened to them, saying, oh, it was because they dressed like this, or it was because they were like this, or it was because of this, instead of blaming the actual cause, which was that these men were completely crazy and enabled by society to commit these murders. And if we are going to not acknowledge the fact that this is a serious problem, what are we doing? I understand that no one is perfect, but when criticism comes and is valid, we sometimes have to listen to it. We have to adhere to it, and we have to work to change. It is clear as day that the toxic masculinity in these societies were a big factor, and maybe even the driving factor for these murders to occur. It was engraved in these men's minds. And the society that they lived in enabled them to do so, resulting in these 8 lives being lost. But before I move on, I want to brush up on one thing, and that is, how does toxic masculinity hurt us as men? Because that is a big point that many people don't seem to understand. That all of their emotions, with the exception of anger, are completely invalid. If you feel hurt, if you feel sad, if you feel whatever, if you feel insecure, that's a weakness, and you have to take it out somehow. I want to ask everyone in this crowd right now, men specifically, when have you felt at times that you wanted to cry, but you were told, crying is not for men, crying is not for boys, you're not allowed to cry. If you cry, that's a feminine thing. If you feel emotions, that's a feminine thing. Men aren't supposed to do that. It's happened to us, it's happened to me, it's happened to many people. I can guarantee you almost half of the people in here. However, where did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us that we were not allowed to cry? In fact, someone close to me once told me that crying was in fact a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a healthy way for us to relieve our emotions. When the Prophet Yaqub lost his son, he cried to the point where he was blind. There's many instances of the seerah where the Sahaba or the Prophet ﷺ cried their hearts out over terrible and horrible situations. However, nowadays, we as a society has taught ourselves that something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, a healthy way for us to relieve our emotions, something that we have, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, we have told ourselves that it's wrong. It's not right to do. And instead, we tell ourselves the right way to let go of all the emotions, because men do in fact go through a lot of stuff as well. And that is not something that many people like to talk about. Men do go through hardships, we go through pain, we go through a lot of things, and yet we have taught ourselves that crying and relieving these emotions is wrong. We must bottle it up to the point, and the only way we release it is through anger, breaking something, breaking someone, hurting someone. This is not right, and this has to change. So for my final point, I'd like to discuss, why should we care, and what do we do? 8 murders is way too much. You know, I thought, when the first 4 happened, I thought that was a lot. But 8, something's got to change, like I've said. As men, it is our Muslim duty to protect our women and children, and yet here we are seeing them getting straight up murdered by us. So much about how on the news people are saying Muslim women are oppressed by Muslim men, Muslim women this, and we always say that's not true. Islam gives rights to women, which it is true. Islam does give rights to Muslim women, but when we're failing to protect them, what are we doing? What does that say about us? We can tell people as much as we want, but our actions speak louder than our words. To these 8 Muslim women and to all Muslim women, I must apologize. We failed you. And I know you guys might be wondering, what do you have to apologize for? Why am I standing up here and apologizing for the actions of these 8 crazy people who don't represent all of us? Now, of course, it's true. We didn't physically go and commit those murders. And I hope that none of us have the ideas of doing something like that. However, the problem here is that we continue to carry on these toxic ideologies that I've mentioned before and I've discussed, and we continue to stay silent when it comes to stuff like this. We just brush it off like it's another Tuesday, and that has to change. We have to start doing different things. We have to start doing things differently. Tawbah, chapter 9 of Quran, verse 81. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ وَإِلَيْهِ أولياء بعض يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر. صدق الله العظيم. Name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. The male believers and the female believers are responsible for each other. We sat on the sidelines hearing story after story and did nothing. We continue to let this toxicity that ends up in the results of our Muslim sisters being murdered to brew even further. That has to change. So what do? We have to destruct this toxic mindset that we have. We have to teach ourselves that the way how things are is wrong and that something must change. We have to be more respectful, more caring, and nurturing to our women. We have to teach our young men that anger and violence is not the way to go. Many young boys these days, they have terrible role models that teach them that mistreating women don't be role models. We have to show them the examples of the Sahaba, the Prophet, and all the prophets from beforehand. We have to show them this is the way how men act. There's many things that we can do, but unfortunately time does not allow me to discuss them in detail. So this is all what I can say right now. And to young men, when you see your fellow Muslim sisters being abused, being mistreated, you have to speak up. You can't just sit on the sidelines anymore, like I said. Things must change. I want to end my khutbah with one thing. These women should have been alive right now. They should have been acquiring their degrees. They should have been spending time with their family and friends. They should have been continuing their careers in whether it was nursing or photography or whatever it was supposed to be. They should have been in different places doing different things right now. But right now, they're all in the same place, 6 feet underground, doing the same thing, lying dead. They had friends, families, and people they should have made memories with. But now, they are nothing but memories to those friends and families. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive these women who were killed and grant them into Jannah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive and grant everyone here and everyone listening into Jannah. Before I end my khutbah, I just like to say one last thing, and that is that we here at this masjid, we are with an organization called Muslims of LA. We are planning to give a hygiene drive. All donations will be helpful and could benefit. We're gonna go to Skid Row and we're gonna help out the homeless people. There's many good deeds waiting for you to do so. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله الحمد لله الذي بعث فينا الأنبياء لتصحيح العقائد والأعمال ولهداية إلى طريق الوسط والاعتدال. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. أما بعد، فيا أيها الناس اعلموا أن أهم أمور تصحيح العقائد والأعمال وتكميل اليقين. قد ذكرنا نبذة منها والآن نتم بقيتها، فنقول منها الإيمان بالرسل خصوصا بخاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين. لا تفرطوا فيه فإنه عبده ورسوله الأمين، ولا تنقصوا في شانه فإنه مقدس معصوم عصمه رب العالمين. ومنها الإيمان بيوم الدين والإيمان بالقدر والبعث بعد الموت. وتحشروا إلى مالك يوم الدين وتصدقوا بأن المعراج حق وكرامات الأولياء حق والصحابة كلهم عدول وأفضلهم الأربعة على ترتيب خلافة. واعتقدوا في التفاصيل بكل ما أجمع عليه أهل السنة والجماعة، واجتنبوا الغلو والضلالة. سبحانه تبارك وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا لا تغلوا في دينكم غير الحق ولا تتبعوا أهواء قوم قد ضلوا من قبل وأضلوا كثيرا وضلوا عن سواء السبيل. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم منه بالآيات والذكر الحكيم. إنه تعالى جواد كريم قديم ملك بر رؤوف رحيم ورب حليم. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا كما أمر، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له إرغاما لمن جحد به وكفر، وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله سيد الخلائق والبشر. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه مصابيح الغرر. عباد الله، اتقوا الله تعالى من سماع اللغو وفضول الخبر، وانتهوا عما نهاكم عنه وزجر، واعلموا أن الله أمركم بأمر بدأ فيه بنفسه وثنى بملائكة المسبحة بقدسه، وثلث بكم أيها المؤمنون من برية جنه وإنسه، فقال تعالى مخبرا وآمرا: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد نور القلب وقرة العين وعلى آل محمد. فيا أيها المشتاقون إلى رؤيا جماله صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما، خصوصا منهم ذي الأصل العريق أمير المؤمنين سيدنا أبي بكر الصديق رضي الله تعالى عنه، وعلى الزاهد الأواب أمير المؤمنين سيدنا عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله تعالى عنه، وعلى أمير المؤمنين سيدنا عثمان بن عفان رضي الله تعالى عنه، وعلى أمير المؤمنين سيدنا علي بن أبي طالب رضي الله تعالى عنه، وعلى تمام العشرة المبشرة وعلى سائر الصحابة والتابعين رضوان الله تعالى عليهم أجمعين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين، اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين، واخذل الكفرة والمبتدعة والمشركين، وكن اللهم حافظهم وموئدهم وناصرهم يا رب العالمين ويا خير الناصرين. اللهم شتت شمل أعداء الدين ومزق جمعهم يا مبيد الظالمين. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، واجعل اللهم آمنا سائر بلاد المسلمين، واكتب اللهم الستر والسلامة والعافية علينا وعلى عبيدك الحجاج والغزاة والمسافرين في برك وبحرك من أمة محمد أجمعين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة واغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين، والحمد لله رب العالمين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله العلي العظيم يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. أقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون. ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم ولا الضالين. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. ربنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم احفظ لنا من كل بلاء الدنيا وعذاب الآخرة. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم، وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين، والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the khutbah. May Allah accept from Qari Hafiz Abdul Majid and also from our Youth Speaker Zoraiz Hashmi. Apologize for you because of the delay today and because the speaker was delayed, being a little late. Recording of this khutbahs are available on the Facebook IATP and also YouTube channel IA Torrents. Hajar and ILF are currently presenting the continuous program series for sisters, Muslimas, Blueprint, Prophetic Character. Instructor Ustada, Sister Latia Khalil. This program is every Saturday at 7 p.m. at IAT. If you have double park, please remove your car ASAP. Again, we are reminding you again, there is no parking at the Flower Shop Plaza, and no parking at the Rehab Center, and no parking at the entrance of the driveway of our neighbor. And one more announcement. We have a Muslim of LA are raising fund for the purchase of van for their homeless feeding project. Please support them generously. They have a table